The Cincinnati Reds have been one of the most popular teams in the 2023 MLB season. Reason being is their story. Their story is pretty simple. They went from being a historically horrible team in 2022 to a team with a lot of promise in 2023. The reason is key guys who they've been hoping for to develop have finally made the proper adjustments to not only adjust at the MLB level, but are also getting a lot better. Going into the season, I think the people who thought that the Reds had a chance to even contend for the NL Central were Reds fans. There was no MLB fan outside of Reds fans that were telling you that this Reds team was actually going to be good. Well, overall, they might have been a bit right. The Reds fans were right. But at the same time, the Reds have become the biggest frauds in baseball, and it's because of the fans. Let me go ahead and get into it right now. The Reds have one of the youngest cores in all of baseball and can even be fun to watch. I mean, rookies like shortstop Matt McLain, or even a player like TJ Friedl, who was called up in 2021 and is finally making an impact on that Reds team. I mean, these guys have had guys who have performed at high levels coming from all sorts of different situations. As cool as it was to talk about or to even watch, the hype went from something cool to the fans getting on their knees for the Cincinnati Reds. Why did they begin doing this? Well, the reason is of course, Elly De La Cruz. Elly De La Cruz, the one and only. As soon as he was called up and people realized he was a lot like O'Neal Cruz of the Pittsburgh Pirates, they began riding this man to death. I mean, the Reds were the sensation of baseball, but more than the Reds, it was Elly De La Cruz. Elly came up hot, but has since then cooled down. When he came up, though, the Reds were also burning hot with wins. They were not losing. Now, not so much for the win column for the Cincinnati Reds. They're consistently losing must-win games and are now 3-7 in their last 10 games. The biggest thing I believe for the Reds that's been a killer is that they've been awful in their divisional games. Now, no one will, of course, point that out because, they have an agenda for the Reds, but they struggle very, very bad in these very key divisional games. Or no one will point out how Elly De La Cruz is not as good as baseball is trying to make him to be. I love Elly, so I'm not going to say I don't. He's one of my favorite players in all of baseball. And, I can't say that I don't like the Reds. I like what they've built, and I think that they have a very, very fun team. But what I have to say is that they are frauds. They're not as good as people make them out to be. And you know what? The agenda hasn't stopped either. It's been that way throughout the entire season. I believe the front office of the Reds would even agree with me at this, right? At the trade deadline, the Reds didn't make an impact move. The front office decided not to go ahead and bring in another arm when fans were really hoping and expecting another arm to be brought in. They didn't do it. The front office doesn't have a ton of faith in this team right now. So I think right now, the Brewers are ahead of them. So that's the way that you have to look at it. There are multiple teams that are ahead of them. The Brewers with their pitching, of course, and then rookies who have even stepped up for them. And I think statistically and also looking at the holes on the Reds, they won't be able to get first place in the NL Central, especially with the Cubs creeping up on them. Of course, the Cubs elected not to sell at the deadline, which was also kind of a shock. They kept key pieces like Marcus Stroman, Ian Happ, and Cody Bellinger, which have all been crucial to their success. And again, it's just another example of a team a little bit further on in their rebuild than the Reds. Now, what I will say about the Reds is look out for 2024, because if that team goes out and adds some pitching, even if it's a veteran arm, I'm sure that they will be ready to contend in the Central. But I'll continue to say it. Right now, that team is being overrated to death, and it just needs to stop. The one scary part, though, even with this Reds team being so good, is that the division is in a great spot. That is scary for Reds fans, and it should be scaring them, because the Brewers are emerging with young players, and unless they let their two starting pitchers walk, they are likely going to be contending for a long time. The Pittsburgh Pirates are ending their rebuild, of course, as they've called up many top prospects and are likely only going to be getting better as, of course, free agency happens, and again, prospects continue to get called up like Tamar Johnson, Paul Skeens, and more. Then, of course, we've already talked about the Cubs. So right now, it's just a weird spot for the Reds, but I will just say, they become frauds, and it is because of the fans. It is because of the fans loving this team so much to the point that they believe that they're some god team. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Make sure to drop a like if you haven't already. Let me know your opinion on this Reds team right now, and peace out.